All right, so you guys ready to blast off with us?
Buckle up.
You sent in some seriously fascinating stuff about moon landing conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
And I've got to admit, this deep dive is right up my alley.
Oh, mine too.
We're cracking open a Wikipedia article
Oh, wow.
from the Bulgarian version, no less interesting,
So.
all about the theories surrounding those giant leaps for mankind.
Very cool.
Don't worry, we got it translated, so no need for a Bulgarian crash course.
Good.
Let's see if we can separate fact from fiction.
Right.
Or at least get a better grasp on why some folks think those lunar landings were a little too staged.
That's a real rabbit hole, isn't it? What's interesting is how these series fall into a few distinct camps,
Yeah.
each with its own set of beliefs about what really happened or didn't happen back in '69.
Yeah, let's break down those camps. From what I skimmed,
Okay.
it seems like some people think it was all smoke and mirrors,
All right.
while others think maybe just parts of it were fudged.
Right. You've got the complete hoax folks who believe the whole thing was staged right here on Earth.
Uh-huh.
No moon, no landing, just some clever filmmaking.
Wow.
Then you have the partial hoax camp,
Okay.
who entertain the idea that maybe they orbited the moon but never actually touched down.
Right.
Or perhaps some missions were legit while others were fabricated.
Okay.
And then there's the landing but cover-up group, who believe the landings happened, but something was discovered. Maybe aliens, maybe some wild gravitational anomaly that the powers that be decided to keep under wraps.
So we've got our full-blown skeptics,
Yeah.
or maybe not,
Yeah.
and our they're hiding something crowd.
Huh.
But before we get into the specific evidence they use, I'm dying to know how many people actually subscribe to these theories. Is it just a handful of outliers,
Yeah.
or is there a bigger slice of the population that's buying into this?
You might be surprised. Back in 1999, a Gallup poll found that 6% of Americans believed the moon landing was faked. And get this, after a Fox TV special aired in 2001, that number jumped to a whopping 20%. That's 1 in 5 people questioning the official story.
Whoa, 20%. That's way more than I would have guessed. What was going on in 2001 that might have influenced that spike?
Well, if you think back to the social and political climate of the time,
Right.
it was a period of declining trust in government, post-Vietnam War, Watergate scandal, you name it.
Yeah.
People were already primed to question authority,
Uh-huh.
and that likely spilled over into skepticism about the moon landings, too.
Right. Like if they lied about that, what else are they lying about?
Exactly.
It's a slippery slope of distrust. And it wasn't just an American thing either, right? I saw that a good chunk of Russians were also skeptical.
Exactly. In a 2000 poll, 28% of Russians expressed disbelief in the moon landings. And even more recently, around 25% of young Americans, those aged 18-25, have voiced their skepticism.
Wow.
So it's clear this isn't just a fringe idea. It's a persistent belief that spans generations and cultures.
Wow. It's really interesting how these theories seem to tap into something deeper.
Right.
A sort of fundamental questioning of authority and what we're told to believe. Speaking of what we're told to believe, let's dig into some of the specific claims that conspiracy theorists use to support their case. I'm flipping through this Wikipedia article now, and some of these are pretty wild. Like, for starters, they talk about how there's no blast crater under the lunar module. You'd think that massive landing would leave a pretty significant mark, right?
That's a classic one, and it does seem counterintuitive at first.
Yeah.
But you have to remember that the moon's surface is covered in a unique layer of dust called regolith.
Okay.
It's not like soil on Earth. It's been bombarded by meteorites for billions of years, and it's incredibly fine and powdery.
So are you saying this regolith wouldn't react the same way to something landing on it?
Exactly. Instead of forming a deep crater, the engine exhaust would have dispersed the regolith outward, creating a more shallow, diffused depression. Think of it like blowing on a pile of flour. You'll move the flour around, but you won't carve out a distinct hole.
Okay, I can picture that. But what about the claim that there were no visible flames coming out of the ascent engine during liftoff from the moon? You see those massive plumes of fire during rocket launches here on Earth. So it does seem odd that it wouldn't be the same on the moon.
Right. We expect those dramatic Hollywood-style flames.
Yeah.
But on the moon, it's a different story. The lunar module used a mixture of hydrazine and nitrogen tetroxide as fuel.
Okay.
These chemicals ignite on contact, producing a nearly transparent exhaust plume, especially in the vacuum of space. It's less of a fiery spectacle and more of a silent, almost invisible push.
So no roaring flames against the blackness of space. I guess that makes sense, but it's not exactly what we're used to seeing.
Yeah.
Okay, here's one that always gets me. The American flag waving in the wind.
Right.
But there's no wind on the moon, right? So how's that possible? Did they bring a fan with them or something?
Huh. I wish. The flag wasn't actually waving in the wind.
No.
It was mounted on a telescopic pole with a horizontal bar to keep it outstretched.
Okay.
For that iconic look.
Huh.
Those ripples you see in the photos are simply wrinkles from where the flag was folded up during transport.
Ah, so it was more about presentation than an actual lunar breeze.
Right.
Well played, NASA. Okay, what about this? The lunar module weighed a hefty 17 tons, yet you see the astronauts' footprints sinking deeper into the surface.
Yeah.
How does that work? Shouldn't the module have left way deeper impressions?
Good question. This one comes down to understanding the difference between weight and pressure. Yes, the lunar module was heavy, but its weight was distributed over a fairly wide area.
Okay.
The astronauts, on the other hand, were concentrating their weight on the small surface area of their boots.
So it's like how a stiletto heel sinks into soft ground more easily than a flat shoe, even if the person wearing them weighs the same.
It's exact.
It's all about how that weight is focused.
Precisely. The astronauts, with their boots, focused on those small points, exerted more pressure on the soft regolith, resulting in those surprisingly deep footprints.
All right, that clears that up. But what about the shadows in the photos? They often look strange, some longer or shorter than others.
Right.
Like things aren't quite lining up.
Yeah.
Some conspiracy theorists point to this as proof that the lighting was artificial, like on a movie set.
It's all about perspective, those tricky angles playing tricks on the eye. When parallel lines appear to converge in a photo, it can create the illusion that objects are different sizes or casting shadows of different lengths.
Right.
You see the same effect here on Earth, but it's more noticeable in the lunar landscape because there aren't familiar objects for reference.
So just like those optical illusions where you think one line is longer than another, but they're actually the same length?
That's a great analogy.
It's our brains trying to make sense of the unfamiliar.
Yeah.
Okay, and lastly, let's talk about those moon rocks. Some conspiracy theorists argue that they're identical to rocks found in Antarctica, suggesting that NASA just grabbed some Earth rocks and called it a day.
Right.
But aren't moon rocks pretty unique? I mean, they came from the moon, right?
Exactly. While it's true that some meteorites originating from the moon have been found in Antarctica,
Okay.
the rocks brought back by the Apollo missions have unique compositions and characteristics that set them apart from anything found here on Earth.
Like what makes them so different?
Well, for one, they contain isotopes, different versions of elements, and minerals that could only have formed in the extreme environment of the moon. They tell a story of bombardment by cosmic rays and solar wind, something Earth rocks just haven't experienced. Plus, the scientific community has had decades to analyze these samples, and they've consistently confirmed their lunar origin.
Okay, so those moon rocks are definitely the real deal. It sounds like a lot of these claims can be debunked with a little scientific know-how. But I'm curious about something else. The impact of that 1978 film, Capricorn 1. It was about a faked Mars mission, and I've always wondered if that contributed to the spread of moon landing conspiracy theories. Did it plant a seed of doubt in people's minds, showing how a space mission could be convincingly faked?
Capricorn 1 is a fascinating case study.
Right.
Imagine watching that film.
Right.
A seemingly perfect mission unfolds.
Yeah.
But it's all happening on a soundstage.
Right.
It makes you wonder, even if just for a moment,
Yeah.
could they really pull this off?
Yeah, I can see how a film like that, even though it's fictional, could tap into those existing anxieties about government deception and add fuel to the fire of public distrust. It makes you question everything you see.
Exactly. It normalizes the idea that space missions could be faked, making the leap to believing in a moon landing hoax that much smaller.
Okay, so we've got to acknowledge the power of stories and images, even fictional ones, to shape our beliefs.
Right.
But before we get too deep into the psychology of conspiracy theories, let's shift gears a bit and talk about one piece of evidence that really caught my eye in this Wikipedia article: laser reflectors left on the moon. Now, how do those work, and what do they tell us about what's really up there?
These laser reflectors are like a beacon of truth on the lunar surface. They're essentially arrays of mirrors left behind by the Apollo missions.
Okay.
And scientists here on Earth can shoot lasers at them.
Wow.
Those lasers bounce back, allowing us to measure the distance between Earth and the moon with incredible precision.
Wait, hold up. We're bouncing lasers off mirrors on the moon? That sounds straight out of a sci-fi movie. How is that even possible?
It's pretty mind-blowing, isn't it?
Yeah.
But it's real, and it works. The fact that we can consistently get these precise measurements year after year proves that those reflectors, placed there by human hands, are sitting right where they should be, on the surface of the moon.
That's a pretty solid piece of evidence. It's hard to argue with lasers and mirrors.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
We've looked at the different types of moon landing conspiracy theories,
Right.
the prevalence of those beliefs, and some of the key claims used to support them. But here's the thing.
Yeah.
If a lot of this evidence can be debunked with a bit of scientific explanation, why do these theories persist? What is it about the human mind that makes us want to believe even when the facts point in a different direction?
It's a question that goes way beyond the moon landing, doesn't it? It's about why we gravitate towards certain narratives, even if the evidence might be shaky.
You're telling me I'm starting to think this is less about hard proof and more about how our brains crave a good story?
Absolutely. Humans are natural storytellers. We look for patterns.
Right.
We want explanations that fit neatly.
Yeah.
And sometimes those explanations are more about satisfying a psychological need than adhering to strict scientific fact. So even if the evidence is iffy, the story itself, this idea of a massive cover-up, hidden truths fighting against the man that can be more persuasive than logic.
Think about it. Conspiracy theories often paint a picture of the little guy, the truth seeker, standing up to a powerful, often shadowy entity.
Right.
It's David versus Goliath, a quest for hidden knowledge that most of the world is blind to.
And if you buy into that story, you're suddenly in the know, part of a select group that sees through the facade, right? It's almost like belonging to a secret club.
Exactly. It feeds into this feeling of intellectual superiority and being one step ahead of the masses. You're not just passively accepting information. You're actively uncovering the real truth.
That's a really fascinating psychological angle I hadn't considered. So even though we can poke holes in the scientific claims, understanding the human element, that need for a compelling narrative and that desire to feel like you're in the loop, that's key to understanding why these theories hold on so tightly.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Why?
And this brings up the issue of critical thinking and media literacy, especially in today's world.
Okay, I'm all ears. How do we encourage people to be more savvy about the information they're consuming?
Part of it is education.
Yeah.
We need to teach people how to evaluate sources, recognize bias, and understand how information can be presented in ways that sway our opinions.
So it's like giving people a toolkit for navigating the information landscape, right? Not just accepting things at face value, but knowing how to dig a little deeper.
You got it.
Yeah.
But it's not just about debunking.
Right.
It's about encouraging a spirit of open and respectful discussion.
Okay.
Instead of shutting down these conversations, we should create spaces where people feel safe to share their perspectives, ask questions, and maybe even change their minds based on new information.
Right, because sometimes that's all it takes to feel like you're being heard and your questions are taken seriously. If you feel dismissed, it's easy to double down on what you believe, even if it's not entirely accurate.
Absolutely. And I think the scientific community has a huge role to play here. It's not just about presenting the facts, but about doing so in a way that's relatable and engaging, that meets people where they are.
So making science less intimidating and more like an invitation to learn.
Exactly.
I like that. Okay, but let's talk a little more about the historical context. You touched on it earlier, but I think it's important to understand the atmosphere in which these theories arose.
It's crucial to remember that the moon landings happened during a very turbulent time. Think about it. The Vietnam War, the Cold War, all this social and political upheaval. It was a time of heightened anxiety and a growing distrust in institutions.
So people were already primed to question authority and the official narrative. And then this unbelievable technological achievement, the moon landing, comes along. It must have seemed almost too good to be true.
Exactly. It was a time when people were starting to wonder, who are we supposed to believe? And then add in the rapidly evolving media landscape, where images and stories could instantly reach millions of people, shaping their perceptions and feeding those anxieties.
So the stage was set for both this incredible triumph of human ingenuity, the moon landing, and also the seeds of doubt that would later blossom into these persistent conspiracy theories?
Precisely. It's this fascinating interplay of scientific progress, social anxieties, and the power of the media. It really makes you think about how we perceive reality
Yeah.
How easily those perceptions can be swayed,
Right.
and the importance of cultivating a healthy skepticism without falling into the trap of distrusting everything.
Okay, so let's zoom in on one claim that often comes up.
Huh.
The lack of stars in the photos taken on the moon. Conspiracy theorists argue that if those photos were really taken on the moon, we should see a sky full of stars.
It seems logical at first, but think about trying to see stars in a brightly lit city at night.
Right.
It's difficult because the city lights overpower the fainter light from the stars.
Yeah.
It's the same principle on the moon.
Mm.
The photos were taken during lunar daytime
Okay.
with the surface brightly lit by the sun.
Okay, so the sunlight was washing out the stars, making them too faint to be captured by the cameras.
Exactly. And speaking of challenges in space,
Yeah.
another popular claim is that the astronauts couldn't have survived the journey through the Van Allen radiation belts.
Right.
These are zones of intense radiation surrounding the Earth, and they sound pretty scary, I'll admit.
Yeah, that's one that always made me wonder, how did they get through that?
Well, the Apollo missions were meticulously designed to minimize exposure. They passed through the belts quickly, reducing the time spent in the most intense radiation zones.
Okay.
Plus, their spacecraft was equipped with shielding to protect them.
So it was a calculated risk, but one that NASA took seriously and addressed with precaution.
Absolutely. And, the astronauts' health was closely monitored after their return.
Yeah.
And there's no evidence of any radiation-related illnesses linked to those missions.
Okay, that's good to know. Now here's a curveball. What about the missing original footage of the moon landing? Conspiracy theorists love to point to this as proof of a cover-up.
Right.
Where's the original high-definition recording?
It's not so much missing as it is unavailable in its original format.
Okay.
While the highest quality recordings are no longer around,
Right.
there are many copies and lower resolution backups that do exist.
So the footage isn't gone, it's just not in its pristine original form.
Right. Back in those early days of space exploration, storage was a precious commodity. Tapes were expensive and space was limited.
Right.
So it was common practice to reuse tapes, recording over older footage, to save resources.
So not a nefarious plot to hide the truth, but just a practical decision based on the technology of the time.
Exactly. It's another case of judging the past by today's standards. What seems strange or suspicious now was just the way things were done back then.
Right. Hindsight is 20/20, isn't it?
Yeah.
We can't impose our current knowledge and expectations onto the past. Okay, I think we've tackled some of the big claims.
Right.
But I want to come back to something we touched on earlier, our fascination with these theories.
Okay.
Why are we so drawn to them? What is it about the moon landings in particular that continues to spark this debate?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? I think it speaks to our innate curiosity, our desire to make sense of the world, even the parts that seem too big or too incredible to grasp. The moon landings represent this pivotal moment in history.
Yeah.
This incredible achievement that seemed to push the boundaries of what was possible.
And maybe for some, questioning it, trying to find another explanation, is a way of grappling with that enormity. It's almost easier to believe in a conspiracy than to accept that we, as humans, accomplished something so audacious.
I think you're onto something there. It's like we need to create a narrative that fits our understanding of the world.
Right.
Even if that narrative means weaving in some alternative facts.
Right.
The moon landing, in a way, becomes a canvas for projecting our own beliefs, anxieties, and hopes.
Wow, that's such a powerful way to look at it. It's not just about debunking, it's about understanding the underlying motivations, the human need to find meaning and make sense of things, even in the face of incredible achievements. It's funny, we've spent all this time dissecting these moon landing conspiracy theories, but I'm realizing it's not really about the moon at all, is it?
No, not really.
It's about us, about how we process information,
Right.
how we grapple with big events, and what we choose to believe.
That's a brilliant observation. The moon landing, this event that captured the world's imagination, has become a sort of Rorschach test for our beliefs and anxieties.
I like that, a Rorschach test.
Right.
So what do you mean by that?
Well, think about it. For some people, the moon landing represents this incredible triumph of human ingenuity, proof that we can overcome any obstacle, achieve the seemingly impossible.
Yeah.
It reinforces their faith in science, progress, and the power of human potential.
Right, like, look what we can do when we set our minds to it. It's almost a utopian vision of our capabilities.
But then
Right.
for others, the very same event becomes a breeding ground for distrust, a symbol of potential government deception,
Right.
and a reminder that things aren't always what they seem.
Yeah.
It fuels their skepticism about authority and feeds into this feeling that we're being manipulated or kept in the dark.
So the same event can hold completely different meanings for different people,
Yeah.
depending on their worldview and their pre-existing beliefs.
That's right.
Like, we're all looking at the same moon, but seeing different things.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to a larger challenge we face in this information-saturated world,
Right.
where we're constantly bombarded with conflicting narratives and competing claims.
Yeah.
It can be really tough to know what to believe, who to trust, and how to separate fact from fiction.
It's overwhelming, to be honest. You try to stay informed,
Right.
but there's always someone out there claiming the opposite is true,
Yeah.
presenting evidence that seems compelling, even if it's ultimately misleading.
Exactly.
How are we supposed to navigate this maze of information?
Well, that's where critical thinking becomes crucial. It's not enough to passively absorb information.
Right.
We need to be active participants in the process,
Mm-hmm.
questioning what we see and hear, evaluating sources, and recognizing bias.
It's like being a detective, right? Looking
Yeah.
for clues, weighing the evidence, and coming to our own conclusion.
Exactly.
But not everyone has those detective skills, do they?
That's where education and media literacy come in. We need to equip people with the tools and the knowledge to critically analyze information, to understand how it's produced, how it's framed, and how it can be used to shape our perceptions.
So it's about empowering people to be savvy consumers of information,
Yeah.
not just passive recipients.
Right.
It's about giving them the confidence to say, wait a minute,
Yeah.
let me look at this from another angle.
Like
Let me
every-
consider the source. Let me do my own research.
Exactly. And I think it's also about cultivating a culture of curiosity and open-mindedness,
Right.
a willingness to entertain different perspectives,
Right.
even those we might initially disagree with.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the most valuable insights come from stepping outside of our own echo chambers and engaging in respectful dialogue with those who hold different viewpoints.
Right. Because even if we ultimately come to different conclusions,
Right.
the process of listening, considering, and debating can sharpen our own thinking and lead us to a deeper understanding of the issue.
Absolutely. It's through those conversations,
Yeah.
those exchanges of ideas,
Mm-hmm.
that we can refine our own beliefs and maybe even bridge some of those divides that seem so insurmountable.
Okay, so we've talked about the psychological factors at play,
Right.
the historical context, and the importance of critical thinking in this age of information overload. But let's come back to the moon.
Ugh.
That sense of wonder and mystery that surrounds it, even if we set aside the conspiracy theories, what is it about the moon that continues to captivate our imagination, even after all these years?
You know, the moon has held a special place in human consciousness for centuries.
Yeah.
It's been a source of myths and legends, a celestial guide for navigators, a muse for poets and artists. It's this constant presence in our night sky, this luminous orb that seems to beckon us with its silent beauty and mystery.
There's a certain romance to it, isn't there?
Yeah, there is.
A sense of longing and awe that transcends cultures and time periods.
Absolutely.
It's like this universal symbol of something beyond ourselves,
Yeah.
something we strive to understand and reach for.
Exactly. And the fact that we as humans
Yeah.
were able to actually set foot on this celestial body, to leave our footprints on its surface,
Right.
it adds another layer to that fascination. It's a testament to our boundless curiosity, our desire to explore the unknown, and our drive to push the limits of what's possible.
It's a reminder that we're capable of extraordinary things when we work together, when we combine our ingenuity with our courage and our thirst for discovery.
And it also reminds us of how much we still have yet to uncover,
Right.
how vast and mysterious the universe truly is.
Yeah.
The moon landing was just one small step, a giant leap for mankind.
Yeah.
But it was only the beginning of our journey of cosmic exploration.
So even though we've spent this deep dive debunking myths and examining the darker side of belief, I think it's important to end on that note of wonder,
Yeah.
that sense of possibility that the moon landing embodies. What other mysteries are out there waiting to be discovered? What other challenges will we overcome? What other incredible achievements will we accomplish?
Those are the questions that should drive us, that
Yeah.
should fuel our scientific endeavors,
Right.
and that should remind us of the beauty and the wonder of the universe we inhabit.
That's a perfect note to end on. We've really gone deep on this one, haven't we?
We have.
We've explored the claims, the evidence, the psychology of belief, the historical context, and those bigger questions about our place in the universe. But as always, we've only scratched the surface. What stood out to you? What will you investigate next? Keep those questions coming. Keep exploring. And remember, the universe is full of wonders, both known and unknown. Keep looking up at the stars, keep asking questions, and keep that sense of wonder alive.